Hello, folks. At the end of February in London, we're gathering 150 high net worth, innovative, actually, none of that at all. We're gathering 150 co-working community builders. That's people who own or run a co-working space and really are interested in what their co-working space can mean for their neighbourhood and growing the community around their neighbourhood and getting everyone connected. That's the way forward, folks. Today, we're talking to Georgia Norton, who ran Playhood, which was a childcare and co-working space in Crouch End in London and is now a consultancy. And Georgia has interviewed she's tracked down 100 co-working spaces around the world who have some form of childcare and co-working offering. And if you think there's 40,000 co-working spaces in the world and only 100 have been found to do this so far. So there's a long way to go with our kind of citizenship attitude to, or approach, if you like, to childcare. And that's pretty much it. Really, really good episode. This is one of a few we're going to do because it's a big, fat, meaty report. So let's get into today. Thanks. Hello, folks. It is the Co-working Values podcast, and let's get right into the show because I'm so excited about today's topic. Georgia, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
Hello. I think I'm known for saying, but what if? And have you met so-and-so who can help you? Because I think I'm known for being quite a connector in my local circles, my community, the schools, my friends, trying to help friends get their ideas out there in the world, and being someone who gets involved in way too many projects, get really excited about strategizing, getting creative, and getting things done. The real funny thing I've realized is what I would like to be known for is actually attending to a few of my own ideas. I spread myself quite thin, devote quite a lot of energy to other people's ideas, love being behind the scenes of something that gets out in the community. But I do have things that I'd like to be working on too, creative and professional projects I've been parking for too long, I think.
Is there anything you've done this year that you'd like to be known for? I hate to feed you the line, but...
No, and that is why I'm sort of... I'm on the right side of nervous right now, but December the 17th... this think tank called New America are publishing my report. It's a big, shiny, very long piece of solutions journalism is what they call it. So basically, to explain what's going on at the start of the year, I saw a post on LinkedIn and went ahead and just applied for a grant. It was a reporting grant looking at innovative childcare solutions. So the idea was to gather, stories from the field, from practice, and to share things that were working when there's so many depressing stats and stories about the childcare space. We'd been, thriving in a co-working space with a nursery school adjacent to it. So I decided it was time to take the case study, out into the world. That was February of 2025. Here we are, reports out December the 16th, and it's what gave me a chance to connect with amazing founders, families, and practitioners all over the world. We went from, our setting at its biggest was 8 per day, really a micro nursery and a really small offering serving a finite number of families in North London. And this report sent me on a real journey, and something's coming out in the world with my name on it, which is the exciting part.
What is the bit I want to make sure we get here? How many people did you speak to who have opened childcare and co-working operations of any shape or size?
Yeah, so the way it worked was Playhood was started in a home. We very much think of the home street neighborhood scale. And I found, I think it was on Instagram maybe, stumbled across a similar setup in New Jersey, and then saw in Tokyo, there was another setting. And I started to wonder how many was out there. So I did start with desk research, and I figured out using Google Maps when people had listed their business as hybrid things, if you search for co-working, you're going to get, what is it, 40,000 co-working spaces around the world?
It's 40,362.
40,000?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew the exact number. So when you search for it with the words childcare or nursery or creche or, related terms to it, it narrows right down to, I think it's 120 operational right now. And there was really interesting, I stumbled across the graveyard, if you will, of about further 40 settings that had experimented with the model and not found it sustainable. So I started auditing that large number, around 160, through reaching out really personally over and over again, trying to get people to make a human connection and talk to me. It was about 30 people that I, formally interviewed, literally all around the world, from, Sydney to Washington State to Berlin to Athens, all over the place. And I got to go and visit a few. So I went to North Carolina and New York and New Jersey and a few places in the States to actually physically visit. A lot of people kindly gave me like a virtual tour. I got to look around and understand the space, because the design of the space is so key to this concept. So yeah, a big number in the sort of official audit, and then a nice chunky number of really high quality. I made friends along the way. I'm in touch with these people. We found a like-mindedness. We couldn't believe other people were doing the same thing as us, because it's really critical to note that these people were so busy serving, a couple of streets, like their neighborhood. You were just trying to sort of recruit staff and meet families who wanted to be part of this in a hyper local way. No one was sharing notes and talking to peers in other countries. And everyone I spoke to said, wow, you're the first person that's been interested in this from outside. And I really want to keep those connections. So hence meeting someone like you, Bernie, who understands that there's so much value in that broader community. I'm bringing to the table a niche model of co-working for your consideration.
So going back to my, I'll see if I let it go through, but I have to send it for a business analysis first. But I feel like there's, even just over the years, I've met so many people who, I don't know, probably like 15 people who have opened or attempted to open some kind of childcare thing. The first was Shazzy and Mustafa in Third Door, and grand matron of childcare and co-working, and there was Liz Moody, who was in Brighton. That must have been like 2011 or something like that. But they've all, I don't know, so it's not fair to say they all, that's inaccurate. But I've had people who want to do this say, is it okay if I do this? They've almost like asking for permission. And then when people do it, I've seen, I don't know, men in the industry go, oh, well done, Georgia. Great job. It feels like a sort of, it's not taken seriously, but it's like such an important part of being a human being and finding childcare. And it's like, I know the childcare thing is like a massive conversation, but it's like, I don't know, would you like fries with that conversation when it's actually like the main event?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Before I intellectualize this, I have to say the idea is so simple that before your kids in school, essentially the main need here is in that time when you're having to figure out childcare, right? So under 5, your child's under 5. What I'm interested in is that when you have a kid, your relationship to your work will change. There's no way to insulate your worlds, to keep them separate forever. Even if you just have, like in States, 2 weeks off or something, even if any little time for leave and recalibration of what your lifestyle looks like, some people, our leave context in the UK is 52 weeks if you can afford it. We have all these different things that will happen. Some people take sabbaticals. Some people change their working pattern. They start working flexibly. Some people change jobs. Some people take time off. There's all these different things, right? So all of those scenarios I've just listed mean that the early years of parenting are going to have a lot of flux. And we don't have enough flexible solutions to say, that's okay, like, see what happens. things arise, health things, different things happen. We don't have a solution, ready-made to allow for and embrace that flux. And so the idea that, flexible working can dovetail with childcare has been experimented with in a few forms. I can talk about the sort of history of this story, but it absolutely was the pandemic that catalyzed a new group of people to discover how difficult it was to work and care often in the same room, right? The pandemic tore down those walls between
When you say a new group of people,
yes.
When you say a new group of people, do you mean men or a new group of people?
Well, interestingly, in the research, all of the founders were mums. In my research, it was women who'd initiated the solution. It was people who had found that, and again, there's the ones who tried the model before, but post 2020 and beyond were people who said they didn't want to compromise anymore. It's really interesting. The whole discourse seemed frustratingly to be about this shift to working from home, that we spoke in this blanket term that everyone had to work home. Of course, there were people whose jobs couldn't be done at home. And there was also so many of us who found a middle ground, right? Or who knew about the power of co-working, getting together with others to do work. So what I noticed was there were mums who had paused or parked their career trajectories. All of these women I spoke to did something else before. Maybe it was relevant. Maybe they knew a little bit about marketing or community or something. But they decided that they would open settings where desk space and even office space was right next to some kind of provision. So yeah, just to put some parameters around the conversation today and to pick up on what you're talking about. If you were, I'm mapping it with my hands. That's not very helpful on audio only. There is a spectrum from childcare that's extremely casual and ad hoc that you can add on, right? So there's a hierarchy is that there's co-working space. Parents are welcome here because we've thought of some type of provision. And a lot of places can fly under the radar of licensing. They can be like block time. You can have cooperatives, take turns watching each other's kids, or have babysitters or nannies essentially looking after the kids in small manageable pieces. That way you can add on this service and have it as a benefit or bonus. And that's quite similar to what you saw in the olden days with employer on-site care, when there would be creches or spaces for kids to come. Now, further down the other end is something that we saw happen, again, much more on the fringe and much more accelerated by the pandemic, which is people making more committed solutions like micro schools, and pod learning was something the pandemic kind of shone a light on. With Playhood and some of the places that were a bit more similar to what we were trying to do, the children were enrolled in a nursery school. There was teachers, fully qualified educators there looking after children, planning the curriculum. We took children 18 months to 5, and every day the children were there all day, and the corresponding parent who was a member of the space was in the co-working space. And there wasn't you could never say that there was no hierarchy. It was, you can do fulfilling, meaningful work on your own terms, and the children will have an enriching, early years education and care experience. Does that make sense? So there's kind of
beautiful.
A difference between what we were able to pull off in tiny scale and with a custom built space in a home. So Karen Partridge, the founder of Playhood, had renovated a Victorian house. It's in a terrace. Looks like the other streets in our neighborhood. But what she did was in the garden create a distinct garden for children with a studio, 34 square meter studio, which would be their space. And, and resource that and design that at child scale and with all the materials that were relevant. So we had specifically designed spaces for it. That's slightly different from, let's take a central business district office and sort of add on, bolt on kind of options to serve people. I'm splitting hairs here because we're all trying to do the same thing, which is not have to toggle between being a parent and being professional all the time, which is really tiring. It's a complete waste of time. You can't
It is
do
one of the
give everything to everyone all the time.
One of the things I love talking about that got my attention a lot is, I think it was like 2018 was the thing that happened in Impact Hub Birmingham, which was the radical childcare thing. And when I first saw it, I thought, oh, it's like co-working and childcare, so cool. And then it was this discussion. This was a, massive eye opener for me. It was this discussion that like everyone has childcare issues, whether you're, a one parent mum who's a dinner lady in Hackney, or you, I don't know, live on a island. It's an issue. And they discussed all these different, models and why and play and connection and everything like that. And it is like what prompted me to say that. It is what you say. And there's something to do. I remember you, and tell me if I'm wrong, remember you saying how many of these people you spoke to, like predominantly women, started something which was a kind of, lifestyle hack, or they needed to find a solution. You actually said it earlier on, versus I'm going to work out. I haven't got any problem with people providing services, so please don't misinterpret me. But I'm going to add. I've got a kombucha tap, I've got a swimming pool, and I've got a childcare facility, and it's something that commoditizes it when it's actually central to our relationship with our children and things like that.
Yeah, this is so interesting where we are right now. I have such a feeling of urgency, trying to get this work out so that we don't see more settings close through lack of understanding of integrating these worlds, or lack of understanding about the model, lack of, recourse to public funds for support for this, or a business case. I really feel what's happening at the high end is the rise of family clubs. I don't know if you're familiar with Birch, this idea of resorts, reinventing country clubs, reinventing
It's
leisure.
so scary. It's like
where you get to, it's a really long list of wonderful amenities. There's something for everyone, and there's often tiered memberships. There's a chain doing this in like West London right now. There's a punchy monthly membership, and you get access to these things. Co-working is on the list, and childcare or forest school sessions or something for kids. Soft play. There's stuff for kids on the menu. I want to step back and differentiate from that trend, and it's really interesting that money's flowing there. They're private equity backed companies with license to make it look absolutely beautiful and serve specific people in a community. I wholeheartedly think that colocating care with spaces to develop our workforce and to explore our careers and to defend remote working are transformative at the neighbourhood level, and they have so much potential for lowering barriers, to boost equity in the childcare workforce, to help families balance their responsibilities between the parents at home. And there's so much more interesting stuff I'd like to focus on. I hear you. There's kind of this idea that childcare and being together as that it's a new idea. Oh, the generations can thrive on the same site together. Anyone that's doing that is doing something good. But I think that really focusing on looking at how we integrate our routines, our working life with the experience that our children have is possible since the pandemic, when people realize the value of what we started calling key workers at the time, right? And the value of the early years, that it's the foundation for the rest of your life, your well-being. And actually, like I said earlier, flippantly, it's a sort of waste of time to try and separate your worlds. We hide our professional lives from kids quite a lot, or we did in the olden days before they had to walk in on Zoom calls, during the pandemic and so on for so many. I think it's really important that we find sustainable ways to all live together, not gatekeep those things. So yeah, I really felt like I needed to clarify the difference between the settings, and fundamentally co-working is really important resistance. It feels so urgent to me that we fight against knee-jerk returns to norms before the pandemic, like that we would all need to be in an office in a business district and be around our colleagues to get anything done. Like we know better now, and it's unlocked the opportunity for families to have a better time of the early years of parenting. So yeah, defending the co-working and inviting more spaces to think about their members as people with families, and if they have young families, the sorts of things that they need during that time. More flexibility, more spaces that serve different needs.
Is one of the things that just as I've watched it, it always seems like, I know, most childcare, I'm going to say it like this, when the very few people in my life that are worth more than £5 million, they would say, oh yeah, I'm in a co-working space and it has childcare, and they go to a big shiny co-working space dead in the center of town where it's the price of a small car every month to house your child, and they thought, this is amazing. And it was like co-working and childcare for the 1% or whatever we call them nowadays.
Yeah, and those are the ones that didn't sustain it, right? I'm just going to dive in and say there are so many I don't know if I'm allowed to name any names, but along the way there were people who experimented with the childcare as an offering and took that away. There is, what's it called? The Huckle Tree and Second Place, and
Second
places
Home.
that quietly closed it, right? I'm sad to say even in Impact Hope didn't sustain it, but looking around the world, places like the Wing and the Jane Club and big employer initiatives, they quietly folded away this option because it was either a cost center, it was bridging different zoning regulations, it was so difficult to sustain that the ones that have worked are at the neighborhood level where there's true integration. They're creating phenomenally respectful workplaces for childcare employees. They're creating real safety nets. They're really meshing their lives together and doing all kinds of mutual aid. The places that have made the model work have not been at the business end. And there's a lot of research to caution us about the assumption that you can add a crash or that you should take your baby to work. There was famous corporate models from Yahoo, Patagonia, I'm trying to think, Goldman Sachs. Oh my gosh, there was a 1990s explosion of that the solution could just be to add it on. I'm saying that at the neighborhood level, the things that are working are truly integrated spaces that aren't just playrooms. These are proper safe and loving places for children to be have a magical childhood.
I'm really that's what I'd like you to find. Like I just massively believe in looking more around. People are already doing it, so we're a long way down the path. But we spoke a lot about how the pandemic affected things, and I saw, and especially now, like nearly all the co-working spaces felt like they were by Old Street Station, and there's more in neighborhoods than ever before. The commute has, people in my own family are like, why am I going from Essex into Bank Station with a laptop I'm going to open at my desk? I could have just stayed at home and done the same thing. And they never would have been able to have that conversation befere, in 2019. So neighborhood,
I know, and that's it. And so many, there was a lot of suffering, awful things happened during the pandemic, but I gathered together this tiny little handful of stories where people were, and again, it's something the people I spoke to are quite nervous to almost confess. So in Playhood in London, I spoke to fab lady Brit at the Haven collective in Rhode Island, lady over in Tacoma, Washington. People were telling me during the pandemic, we thrived as a little micro community. We helped one another. We created bonds of friendship for life. We set up community dynamics that sustain us now. I think any stories where people did okay or were able to keep their heads above water during something so horrific and unprecedented are needed, because it feels like the world's quite uncertain. There's a lot of crises, multiple crises right now. We're facing into other challenges, and if we know a recipe, if there is any type of formula for neighborhood solutions and family solutions, then I think the world needs to know those stories. So I'm just I really want to shine a light on some of the similarities between places with completely different indicators, like how much of your salary you have to give for childcare or rent, or what the maternal and paternal leave context is in your country. Aside from all of those things, there seem to be some universal truths about what families wanted when they got to design it. So these people were saying, I just want to be able to do a little bit of work and be near enough my kid to continue feeding, or to kind of be able to help out and know what's going on with them. They were just really simple goals. This boils right back down to a basic desire to not be told you have to work in this way and your child has to be cared for in that way. I mean, Karen and I had the same experience of just feeling held at arm's length when our little one started. We were disappointed. Oh, really? Oh, we don't really know what you were told at the door is pushed closed and you're told, go, you go work. We got this. You don't have to think about your kid. And isn't this not realistic as a parent? You are always wondering, thinking about your kid, and things occur to you during the day. So the impetus for these spaces was so innocent and simple, and then the design is often so straightforward. I want to talk about that line between the two spaces, because that's something in all the auditing and all the looking at everyone's floor plans and doing tours with them or walking around with them, I was saying, how do you make distinct spaces that, the adults need printing and a great coffee machine, ideally, really good Wi-Fi, they need plants, they need natural light. We knew the design of the adult space for brilliant, conducive co-working, and we know what children need that's safe and loving and stimulating. And so it was really fascinating to find some common ground. And you know what I found? Again, so many assumptions got blown out the water when you actually go and talk to people. That boundary wasn't like a strong doorway that no one was allowed across, right? It was this really permeable threshold where, because parents are on site and the caregivers knew about their careers, they were able to invite them in when they were studying something. Oh, we've got a doctor, they can come and share this, or someone's granddad's a civil engineer, come and tell us about that. There was all this support and interesting integration of the parents' work into our nursery space at Playhood. And then the other way as well, I spoke to multiple settings, all across America, Europe, Australia, where people who worked in childcare were able to come and use the co-working space. I know that sounds so basic, but the fact of having laptops and desks set up, a space that signals to you this is a place of professionalism, work and training, they were able to come and get their teacher licenses or start their own business, side hustles. I don't know anyone who's, had their kid in just a chain nursery or something has ever professionally networked and become connected on LinkedIn with the workers there, right? We have all these walls between what work is and who does what work. Co-working spaces, blast through all of that. And to hear people say, we work shoulder to shoulder. There's just an enormous amount of solidarity and support for helping you in your work. People toggled in one of the co-working spaces between talking about, a woman was going to have her annual review and she was going to advocate for herself to get more pay or pay rise. It was literally in the same 5-minute conversation about miscarriage. And it's really, I say that quite sharply, because when you're on your employer site, you present in a professional way, and there's things and conversations you can't touch and have, and you downplay parts of yourself. I'm going off on one here about
that's a really, really lovely story.
The fact that the threshold is permeable and you're all humans doing work. And the children are all allowed to be children and just play. And they sometimes would play at work. They would tap on a fake laptop because they sort of knew that these kids know what their parents do for a living and they saw them work. I know it sounds really basic, but that I'm fascinated sociologically. What if more children were in co-working spaces and grew up knowing that you could defend the right to work in your own space in your own terms? What if children had more autonomy? That's transformative of our relationship to work. So I am conscious, and you said a minute ago, we talked about the pandemic a lot, but it feels as massive to me, and my research gave me so much confidence to say this, as big as the way that the Industrial Revolution changed families' relationships to work in the turn of the century, in the early 1900s and 1910s. Children worked in a factory on shifts and their parents worked in the factory, and it was really tricky. And people like Maria Montessori and Margaret Macmillan created neighborhood level solutions to say children need to be taken care of and given education even when they're very young. That we take that for granted now, that we have nursery schools because nurses helped public health initiatives at the local level in London. These were experiments that were done when economically it was impossible for families to thrive with the changes in technology and the world of work. That happened, something similar to that happened to us with COVID, so we needed better solution. Feels as big to me as that. I will move on from COVID now, I promise.
I'm good. I was like enthralled by that whole thing. Like every time you said something popped in my head, because there's like with the, I don't know, like when I studied education at uni and how education came around in the like it was 1880s in the UK, and when our kid is like, oh, I don't want to go to school, and like, mate, you would have, in the olden days, people, school or going to a coal mine, you would have, that kind of thing. And when our son was, first born, the only co-working space with childcare I could find in London was Shazia. And even as a guy with a pushchair, going from Ilford to Putney was like a bridge too far. And I think the idea of taking your kid into central London to a childcare facility where your work is I don't know, I'm sure people did it, but it's a lot to sustain. I think it's this neighborhood connectedness.
It's better if, again, just recasting that relationship, like it just makes more sense, is easier if you situate the work closer to the home and neighborhood. Again, I'm just with the lens of, especially in these early years of parenting, when there are more, appointments and illnesses that are more serious and ups and downs and things. So yeah, sort of resituating that work can revolve around your home base and your neighborhood is huge. But it is also it's going back. Again, nothing is new under the sun. These ideas of integrating these things, it felt like we had just gone so far down the path of structuring them as completely separate. And it's interesting you sort of track this story of how education evolved, who it was for and who offered that. Again, there was often religious impetus or different things that were going on with that. Something that I found really interesting in the research was, again, my research bridged co-working, community development, and then also early years and the kind of literature and research into partnership with parents between teachers and educators, and that education is happening from the earliest. Like I said, it's education doesn't begin at school. We were sending out into the world parents who expected so much collaboration with teachers. We literally, we never posted it, but I wrote this post that said an apology to schools, because children in co-working spaces with childcare, it was not just changing the children's perceptions of their parents and work, but also the parents' perceptions of how you collaborate with people who look after your children, and the access that they had to those people is very, very different when you start school. Now, school became judged on grades and metrics like, whether people came out into the world and got jobs. And it's really important to think about how we value the early years experience and what really good quality childcare looks like. That notion of professionalism and quality is really contested in the early years discourse by academics and practitioners who say, there's been so much move to inspect and do checkbox exercises, and the whole Ofsted context is really intimidating for people who want to integrate childcare. The idea that you're going to have these sorts of insurances and licenses it's so daunting with the paperwork. We've made it really hard to kind of try and design the type of settings we want for our kids. You have to jump through so many hurdles. So when we talk about people that fell by the wayside, couldn't make it work, there's also people I spoke to who had intended to do this and couldn't overcome the barriers to it. The energy for this solution is so much bigger than what you see today.
I think that's really accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's kind of a lot of questions that it's quite a provocative model. A lot of people from different places were interested in our case study. I have to say, we're so late to discovering the co-working world and community because we were a very closed membership group. We weren't actively, you couldn't drop in on our setting and buy a day pass or come for an hour because we had the whole child care situation on site. So we've missed out a little bit on the sort of connection with co-working folks, but we've been so busy presenting at early years conferences, trying to open other settings' eyes to the value of good relationships with parents. We've been on a slightly separate mission, doing connections with academics, having people come in. There's just no research being done on this model. It's just like me trying to say this model is interesting, and a few different people have responded to that with curiosity. So hopefully the paper, the report coming out, will trigger some interesting conversations from those who care about neighbourhood development and the future of co-working.
I think that and I'm looking for it, so maybe that's why I think it's more alive. But that neighbourhood development conversation is high. Like the thing we were watching with John Alexander and Indy and Imi last night. I just sent that link to like 10 people, and 8 of them have come back and said that was so worth watching. And
yep.
That's
one of those was me, because I took away from it the not waiting for permission. That just touched me so much. Okay, so I spent a couple of misguided years moving to the States, and then we came back to London. But the American suburb to me felt so disconnected from a really positive social fabric. There was not the community connections I was used to, having grown up in London and lived and brought up my young children in London. I went to suburb of DC and discovered just a complete lack of serendipity. I wasn't bumping into people. I wasn't seeing anyone. I knew there was, my school world was separate from my work world, was separate from my neighborhood, from my town. And I started a parents co-working club, and people were just sort of like, again, I made it exclusive. I only wanted to do co-working with other people who had elementary school aged children. That was who I wanted to meet and connect with. I tried really hard to offer for free. I booked out community center rooms and tried to lay on this to show them what they're missing. That was very much my impetus. Okay, you don't know about co-working because you all have enough space here to set up home offices during the pandemic. So you're all working in your houses and all in isolation. And we're seeing these horrifying stats about isolation and loneliness. I offered something which was, a lovely, beautiful space, try to do all those things to make it appealing. Just bring your laptop, just drop in, come and hang out. It was so much work for so little response. But anyway, I just did it anyway and kept telling people it was a good idea. That was a real change in me. And I felt last night to hear people talk about you don't need to keep coming up with business plans and coordinating all this funding and doing everything officially. you've just got to be the change. And that, really touched me. Thanks for sending the link.
I've always loved those two, and I think it's all going to go off again for them, and I'm really glad. What we're talking about is the How to Save Democracy and Neighbourhood Power. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. Georgia, we're going to have to do like part 3, 4, 5, and 6 of this. So, Georgia, where's the best place to find you online?
Well, at our website, playhood.club, we are trying to start sharing more of the case studies and more of the directory that we've been putting together to convene co-working spaces that embrace childcare solutions. However, we are working on many projects beyond that. And I think going right back to the beginning of this conversation, when you said, what would you like to be known for in future? I really hope that some of the projects we're looking at, working with architects, designers, town planning, the placemakers of our world, if we can help make public space more accessible for children and community spaces more joyful for whole families, then that's going to be the big thing. So watch this space. We've got plenty of partnerships and stories coming up. Good luck to everyone who's trying to serve their neighborhood with co-working and adding on all the amazing services that can unlock.
Gorgeous. Really appreciate your time. I just really appreciate you hunting down 100 co-working spaces with childcare around the world. If you have done that, get in touch, but because we'd love to have a conversation, all of us, but I haven't found anyone that's done that so far. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention today. This is a little bit longer than we normally go, but this is such an important part of, your co-working community, your neighborhood, and all that juicy citizenship stuff. Again, go check out How to Save Democracy, Neighbourhood Power, which is with John Alexander, Indy, and Imandeep. And what else is in those links? There's the LinkedIn co-working group, which we always post this in, and there's lots of other conversations going in there. There's a lot of stuff about there's a fund and a course available to work out how to get European funding. So if you're listening in the European bit of the world, go and check that link out. And then in February, February the 24th, we'll be in London. There'll be 150 co-working community builders talking all day. You'll just spend all day with your peers, working out, talk about things like childcare, citizenship, how to market your co-working space, and it will be no speakers on the stages, sages on the stages, or anything like that. It's just one great, big, juicy conversation. So wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Georgia.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Cheers.